is if you're worried about being a bragger, you will never be a bragger, because braggers don't worry about being a bragger. They just brag. That's number one. Number two, the way that I teach people, or that we teach people how to leverage their media or share their wins or promote themselves, or however it is to tell.
I mean, we've been told as kids, right? Stay quiet, see unheard, just put your head down, stay unseen. Like, don't get like being noticed is a bad thing. That's something that we've actually been taught. But when it comes to growing a business or getting out there, it's actually the worst advice you could possibly give. And Ryan Dice from Digital Marketer, he calls it like the tall poppy syndrome, right? People are afraid to stick their necks out also because of the imposter syndrome, but also in fear of the criticism, in fear of being called out, right? Because, with sticking your neck out, right, you get that with it. So I'm curious, like, I'd love to know what's your tips on overcoming that imposter syndrome, but also the advice on, dealing with sticking your neck out there and the uncomfort or dealing with the criticism.
These are my favorite questions, Jason. Let me just tell you, these are my favorite things to talk about in the whole world. So the way that I deal with fear, let's talk about fear first, and then I'm going to give you an amazing tool that everybody can use that's listening to get over imposter syndrome. It's my favorite thing in the world. So fear comes in a lot of different ways. And for the first thing you need to do with fear is like congratulate yourself for feeling fear, because we're human beings and fear is normal. And that means you're normal if you feel fear. So there is not one person on the planet that is free of feeling fear unless they're like not a human and they're a robot, right? Like we all feel fear because when we stretch and when we grow, fear's job, like we talked about earlier, is to keep us safe so that we don't get eaten by a bear or a tiger or a lion or whatever. So fear is ingrained in us, and fear comes in a lot of sneaky ways now, because it often lies to us. Like fear will come in the form of perfectionism. Like, oh, I can't do that because it has to be perfect before I do it. So I'll just wait until it's perfect for me to do it. So there's a way of keeping us from taking action, right? Fear comes in as analysis paralysis, not knowing what to choose, right? As long as we don't know what to choose, we can't take action. So there's fear keeping us from making a decision. Fear comes in imposter syndrome. Oh, they're going to know that I don't know what I'm talking about, so I better not do that, right? Keeps us safe. Or maybe even disease to please, right? Like that, being that person that dims their light to make other people feel better. Because as long as they dim their light to make other people feel good, or like not make other people intimidated by you, you're staying small and you don't have to feel scared, right? So as long as we can acknowledge that those feelings that we're having is fear lying to us and giving us all these excuses to not take action, because that's its job. And then what I like to do in order to put my neck out is I will talk to fear, and I'll be like, all right, fear, I see you, I hear you, I get it. You're trying to tell me that it needs to be perfect before I can do it, because you're going to try to make me not do it, right? I get it. I understand. And I thank you. And I'm grateful for you for keeping me safe. But guess what we're going to do? I'm going to put you in the car. So I envision myself being in a car, and you're going to be in the passenger seat of the car. And we are going to drive through this action together. We're going to go on the journey together. You're going to be there. I get it. Fear is going to be in the passenger seat, but you cannot touch the driver's wheel. You cannot touch the radio, and you cannot say a word. You can just sit there. I'm in charge. And when I do that visualization and I understand that fear is going to be there with me the whole time, no matter what, and I embrace fear, put my arm around it, let's go, let's do it together. Just shut the hell up. I'm driving. It always helps me to embrace it, feel that fear, get it. I'm human, know where it is, acknowledge it, be okay with the fact that I have that fear, and then do it anyway. So that's how I stick my neck out, even when it's scary. And then the imposter syndrome question. I have this tool that I use, and it's called the badass list. And you probably, if you're on Clubhouse with me, maybe you've heard me teach the badass list. It's my favorite, and I will teach it over and over and over again until the cows come home, because it works. And I want everyone to know it. And it came out of having a conversation with my friend when she was having massive imposter syndrome. And I remember sitting on this phone call with my friend, who was a phenomenal coach. She created a course, and she was like, I can't put this course out there. Who the hell am I to talk about this? Who the hell am I? And she was having like textbook imposter syndrome. And her name's Tori, and I hope she listens to this podcast one day. And I said to Tori, I was like, you're crazy. You're just forgetting how amazing you are. You're spending way too much time looking at other people and their courses and what they're doing and comparing yourself to them and forgetting how great you are. And I was like, you know what? Let's make a list of all the times in your life when you were a badass. Let's do it. And this is we were just playing, having a conversation. She's like, okay. she starts writing all these moments in her life, business moments, life moments, all kinds of different moments. And I'm like, okay, read those out loud. She starts reading them. And I'm like, Tori, is that person worthy of putting out this course right now? She's like, yeah, that person is. And I'm like, well, that person's you. So sometimes we just need that reminder that we've done all the things. We are worthy of doing it. We all have badass moments, whether they are life moments. Maybe you ran a marathon. Maybe you were sick and you overcame it and you almost died, but you like came back stronger and better than ever. Maybe you spoke on stage in front of thousands of people, or you made your first 7 figures, or you gave birth to a human being. Like, we're all incredible. Now, just write those down. And then anytime you're feeling imposter syndrome, read those moments out loud as if you're reading them about somebody else, and take yourself out of it and read it as if it's someone that you are like comparing yourself to on social media, and ask yourself, is that person worthy? Like, is that person impressive? Guarantee you'll say, oh my God, yeah, that person's pretty cool. And then remember that that person's you, and go into whatever you are doing knowing that that is you.
Man, I love that. I love that. And so I guess my follow-up to that is, how do you translate that into the content you put out there of still promoting yourself, but not being sleazy promoting or being too salesy or whatnot? Because I think we think we're being too salesy, and it's usually we're not being salesy enough or promotional enough. But then there's also the people who are out there that are just like, okay, you're way too promotional. So how do you balance that?
Well, first thing is if you're worried about being a bragger, you will never be a bragger, because braggers don't worry about being a bragger. They just brag. So just know that if you're like actually having that worry, it's never going to come off that way. That's number one. Number two, the way that I teach people, or that we teach people how to leverage their media or share their wins or promote themselves, whether it's on social media or in mainstream media or on video or however it is, or even in sales, is to tell stories. So there's 2 different ways. Let's put it in with sharing media. Let's say that you were in Entrepreneur magazine, right? You had a whole full article all about you. You could do it this way. You could say, hey, guess what? I was in Entrepreneur magazine. Check it out. Okay. People will be happy for you and they'll be excited, and that's cool. And you could do that once, but then you're in it again, and then you're in it again. So every single time you're going to say, look at me, I was in Entrepreneur magazine. What if you instead of saying, look at me, I was in Entrepreneur magazine, what if you thought about the objections that the clients that work with you normally have? Maybe they're nervous to sign up with you because they're scared. Or they, what are their main objections? And then what if you told a story about that entrepreneur article or interview that kind of made you have those same objections? So maybe, I did this interview with Entrepreneur magazine, and they asked me this one question. And this question rocked me to my core, and it made me feel so unbelievably scared to speak my truth and say the answer to this question. But I did it anyway. I felt the fear and I did it anyway. And now here's the article of me saying something that I've never said publicly, right? Or like telling some kind of story that ties in an objection that maybe that client is having about working with you. And then they read this story that you tell about you feeling that way and overcoming it and doing it anyway. And then boom, they see the social proof of you being in Entrepreneur magazine. So what does that do? It brags about you being in Entrepreneur magazine, but it doesn't, because really what it does is it teaches how to get over an objection that your client, your current maybe customer, that could be a customer, is having in that moment. And so then they can relate to you, they can learn something, and then boom, they see the social proof and the credibility from Entrepreneur magazine at the same time, and you didn't even have to brag about being in it. So that's how we share wins.
That's amazing. That's awesome.